Judaism understands society, and a good society, not to be based on romantic notion that people will do good. I love you, it's not, I mean romantic with a capital R, but you're nice and I'm nice, and I love you and you love me, and we all feel good, and hooray for the Lord. Leo Beck, one of the greatest Jewish minds of the 20th century, made quite clear in a very deep-reaching essay on Christianity as romantic religion that you cannot make a working, just society on romantic religion. People will not do the right thing automatically. That's the point. Isn't that something? From the same people who gave us the Torah and who wrote chapter 1, or God wrote it, or we wrote it, or whoever wrote it, and man created in the divine image, and God saw all that he had done, and behold, it was very good. So we believe that man is essentially good, by the way. Another reason for being Jewish, but that's for another time. The same Jewish tradition which talks about the essential divine element in the human being, and we have a lot to say about that. The same tradition that talks unceasingly about the divinity within human beings, the divine qualities, is the same Jewish tradition which says that when you build a society that you want to work, it can't be built on notions of people doing good things. It has to be built on the notion of law. That's where we are. It has to be built on the basis of law, of quantification of behavior. You don't have to love your mommy or your daddy, but you have to open the door. You have to bring a cup of tea. You have to not sit in their chair if they're still alive. These are things that the Torah makes quite clear. Once I say we have to figure out, say for ourselves, what do we understand to be a just society, I lastly have to point out, before we do a little traveling through the sources, point out something I think personally is important, and that is, what might all this mean that we're talking about to people, to Jews, who are not necessarily observers of halakha? Let's say, if I can use the vernacular, I hate it, but I have to use it. I'm not religious, okay? There's a problem in language, of course, a very severe problem within the Jewish mindset, which is that religious is identified with doing Torah, and non-religious means either I don't do Torah, or I do Torah naturally. Those were the arguments I remember hearing as I was growing up from the neighbors. You know, I don't go to synagogue and I don't do Torah, but I'm a good person. That was interesting. It was also a study in honesty. It's like, I'm a good person because I would not steal from another person. I didn't learn that from the Torah. I know that. I had all that from growing up. We are talking about what Torah could mean to Jews who are not followers of halakha. To Jews who are not assiduous followers of the provisions of halakha, of Torah law. What can this mean? And I have to address this, it seems to me, that any discussion such as we're having tonight would be flawed greatly if we didn't see whether it makes any sense to anybody except so-called orthodox observers of the law. One thing I might say is, in order to make sense here, another question that we have to ask ourselves, we have lots of questions, Jews, you know that. A lot of questions, few answers, mostly questions. This is why we want to get to the world to come, to paradise. You understand that a great formulation for paradise in the Jewish mentality is, paradise essentially will be an uninterrupted flow of the ability of asking God all the questions that you had while you were here that nobody had answers for. So if that turns you on, there's hope, and look forward to it. Me, I'm not in a rush, but anyway, it's there. Question you have to ask, what constitutes Jewish authority in my life? My argument is, across the board, non-denominational, just plain ordinary generic Jewish, is that every serious Jew has to ask himself or herself the question, what constitutes Judaic authority in my life? Next, I'm saying, arguing, offering, that the non-halakhic Jew can be doing Torah not because he is a consistent doer of the halakha, but because he wishes to live his life in accordance with what the Jewish tradition teaches. And And therefore, if such a Jew should happen to have employees, Jewish or non-Jewish employees, I would say, I would argue that a Jew is obligated to treat his employees according to Jewish tradition, which goes way beyond the law's requirement in the state of Ohio for employer-employee relationships. We don't have, again, the time tonight to do that. It's a whole other subject area, employer-employee relationships. But a question that I have, and that I ask frequently around the country is, do Jewish institutions, in fact, treat their employees according to Jewish tradition? That's in terms of contracts, in terms of the terms of the conditions of employment, etc. Do the people that clean our toilets come out lower on the scale of worth than the people who invent the toilets? Have to ask that question. What's a worker? What are workers' rights? And I would want to say, and again, you come to us and you can study this stuff for the rest of your lives, you should, what Jewish tradition has to say about our obligation to the people that work for us makes American practice look anemic. And there's a place to start. You don't have to be a halakhic Jew, and that is, do I treat my employees Jewishly? Another thing which I learned from the Supreme Court of Israel, they were one of the great institutions of Jewish life that ever was, ever. And that is embedded really in the Foundations of Law, it's called Foundations of Law Act of 1980. Israel is a secular Jewish democracy. That's its definition. Secular Jewish democracy, and that is not oxymoron either, by the way. And yet within that secular Jewish democracy, the Foundation of Law Act of 1980 says, which was prompted really by the Supreme Court of Israel, but enacted by the Knesset, that whenever there is encountered by the lawmakers, the jurists, a matter of law which has not been dealt with before, this is called a lacuna, an open space in the law, a hole, okay, a lacuna, that the two lawmakers are bidden to consult the Jewish tradition as part of the process of coming to determine what the law shall be. That's in a secular Jewish democracy, by the way. Isn't that interesting? That they are bidden to consult the Jewish tradition for its input, they didn't use that word, we use it, for its input and for its potential contribution to the discussion and to the articulation of a new piece of law. So I would say that's for halakhic people too. You see my point? All the members of the Israel Supreme Court are not halakha-observing Jews, or Torah-observing Jews, or even Jews. You don't have to be Jewish to be in the Supreme Court. There's one non-Jew in the Supreme Court of Israel, etc., and all the whole juridical system all the way down. And lastly, I would say, what's all this got to do for Jews who are not halakhic Jews? And that is a commitment to what we're calling, and you know the term, tikkun olam, in one of its meanings, making the world better, fixing the cracks. We are here to enjoy life. It's good. And as Mel Brooks said, it's good to be king. Remember, this is a very Jewish, it was a very Jewish comment. Mel Brooks, one of my favorite teachers. Good to be. This was H. He translated from the Yiddish. It's not so bad to be king. But we're also here to leave it a little bit better when we leave than it was when we found it. That's called tikkun olam. And you don't have to be halakhic Jew, you have to be a Torah Jew. And all Jews are Torah Jews. All Jews are Torah Jews by definition. Now, let's look at a couple of these illustrations here. How are we doing? Oh, yeah, we good?